This is Connected to Chicago with Bill Cameron, covering the big ideas.
Everything we do will be fully transparent.
The tough choices.
Guacamole? No, I like guacamole.
The farce.
Hardy har har.
And the corruption.
I've got this thing, and it's golden.
Plus, special reports and newsmaker interviews, along with an esteemed panel of reporters. Now, Bill Cameron.
We begin this week with our old friend from the political beat, Andy Shaw, who now heads the Better Government Association. Andy, welcome back.
Always a pleasure, Bill. Happy holidays to you and the listeners.
Okay, we should begin with Bobby Rush, 1st District Congressman in hot water. What's this all about?
Well, we decided that our watchdog work should go beyond city, county, suburbs, and Springfield, and then we should also look at elected officials out in D.C., congressmen and senators, who also collect a lot of campaign cash and charitable donations and spend a lot of our tax dollars to see if there's anything that the public should be aware of. And our cursory look at the entire Illinois delegation found one thing that jumped out at us, and that was the financial dealings of Bobby Rush, the longtime South Side congressman, former alderman. You and I both covered him during the Harold Washington years. We found that $3 million in campaign cash and charitable contributions have flowed to Congressman Rush and a series of nonprofits he set up over the years. And there are some troubling findings. For instance, SBC, which is now AT&T, gave the congressman a $1 million grant to one of the congressman's charitable foundations to build a tech center in Englewood, which sorely needed a chance for young people to learn internet and digital skills. This was 13 years ago. 13 years later, there is no tech center and no indication of where the $1 million went.
Oops.
When we interviewed Congressman Rush, he couldn't account for the money. He said there was training of people in the community, but there was no paper trail suggesting who got trained to do what. There were architects' drawings for a tech center, but it never got built. So that was the first red flag. What happened to the money? In addition, $300,000 has been bestowed upon Congressman Rush over the years in political fundraising events, also by SBC, wining, dining, and flying him and others to events. Now, coincidentally, Rush sits on the Telecommunications Subcommittee in Congress, which entertains a lot of legislation that matters to telecommunications companies. By and large, he has voted the way SBC, now AT&T, would want him to vote. He's done the same thing for Comcast, another large contributor, and Exelon, the parent company of ComEd. He also sits on an energy subcommittee. In addition to the $1 million tech center that was never built, there's $400,000 in campaign cash that Congressman Rush paid to his own wife to do whatever. There's almost a couple $100,000 that went in charitable contributions to a church he operates on the South Side. And finally, there is an indication that he hasn't paid any rent on his political office in the Bronzeville community for a decade. That would be roughly a couple $100,000 in rent. Here's the problem. If that's an in-kind campaign contribution, it needs to be listed on your D2s. Nothing's ever been listed. If it's a gift, it far exceeds the gift ban that Congress imposes on its own members. So, bottom line, Bill, an awful lot of questions that Congressman Rush wasn't able to answer satisfactorily in interviews we did with him a couple months ago. And therefore, in a column I write in the Sun-Times, which usually is online tomorrow, Mondays, we're calling for 3 agencies to take a look at this. We're saying that the IRS ought to look at the flow of money to make sure it wasn't converted to personal use, which is what got Congressman Jackson in trouble. We'd like to know where the $1 million went, some accounting of that money, also to make sure it didn't somehow find its way into Rush family lifestyle. Questions perhaps about the $400,000 to Mrs. Rush for political work. We think the IRS ought to be answering some of these questions. The Federal Election Commission should be doing the same, and the Congressional Ethics Committee. And finally, there's even a fourth jurisdiction, Attorney General Lisa Madigan, who has the power over nonprofits, including the Better Government Association. Her office regulates nonprofits. And since Congressman Rush has set up several nonprofits over the years, and there's questions about the money flow, we're suggesting she could take a look at this too. We're not accusing him of anything. We shined the light, which is our job. Now it's up to these regulatory agencies to do their jobs and hold him accountable if that's necessary. If this was just sloppy bookkeeping, so be it. The taxpayers have a right to know what the real story is. We uncovered the questions. Now others with more power to subpoena documents, etc., should try to impose accountability and get the answers.
I'm thinking Bobby Rush, once a Black Panther, always a Black Panther.
Well, I'm not going there, and I'm not suggesting that he's the only one in the congressional delegation that has some questions, but I will say that his jumped out at us. Yeah. And this was not a rush to judgment, no play on words intended, but there should be a judgment of Rush.
Mm-hmm. I wonder how much of a legal defense it is to plead ignorance about where the money went.
Well, he has partial explanations of a lot of this, that the building architect came up with a Taj Mahal for Englewood, which was ridiculous. They couldn't afford it. They scrapped the plan. The architect says differently. The architect also indicates that he still owed $40,000 that was never paid. By the way, I failed to mention the last thing on the Bobby Rush beat, and that is that in some ways he seems to be very derelict in paying a lot of his obligations. He has a lot of taxes that were unpaid for a period of time. There were liens on him and penalties. And so his financial dealings from top to bottom seem to have been, at best, very sloppy. And then, of course, whatever else you want to allege, which we're not doing, but others should find out if anything is worse than sloppy.
And, of course, I would note that recently he took a leave of absence from Congress for the stated reason of tending to his ill wife. But it makes you wonder.
Well, what makes me wonder, Bill, is that his wife received $400,000 in campaign cash for her consulting work to him. Now, there is a law, Congress has rules that allow spouses and other family members to be paid from political funds. They have to be paid at a fair market value. I will point out that Congressman Rush has not faced a serious challenge for Congress in more than a decade. One could legitimately say, why did he have to pay Mrs. Rush $400,000 when you have no serious opposition? What political work is there to do?
And you and I have no doubt he'd be re-nominated and re-elected in 2014, but I'm also thinking there's a possibility maybe in 2014 or beyond that he might end up like Jesse Jr.
I wouldn't suggest that, but I would say that it's the job of these agencies to find out if laws have been broken. All we can do is raise the questions, and then the folks with the power to impose penalties, sanctions, fines, wrist slapping, if that's all it merits, it's up to them to do their jobs. We're not judge and jury. We take the first step. And you may be right. Congressman Jackson coasted along for a very long time with impunity until the Blago scandal broke, and then, of course, that opens lots of doors. And as we both know, when the feds start looking, they tend to find something. My favorite example is George Ryan, who, of course, was involved in the licenses for bribe scandal and the death of the Willis kids from a piece of shrapnel off of a truck. He ends up going to jail for things totally unrelated to that.
Yes.
Because when the feds begin to look at your taxes and your behavior and the people around you, they often find something that's indictable that has no relationship to the original stories.
Yeah,
I'm not suggesting this happens with Bobby Rush. It did happen with Jesse Jackson. The first stories, he wanted to be a senator, right?
Right.
By the time it's all over, it's about laundering campaign cash.
He's an inmate. I wouldn't be a bit surprised, you won't say it, but I will, that there might be a paper case coming, brought by the feds, which might create a vacancy in the 1st Congressional District of Illinois.
It takes them a long time to get through these cases. I think the IRS has to take a look. I would hope that Zach Farden, our new U.S. attorney, has the same diligent vigor that his predecessor, Pat Fitzgerald, did, if only to start looking. He may find nothing there that violates any federal statutes, but when we provide this kind of treasure trove of data and information, then I think it's incumbent upon them to do their jobs. Now, they won't tell you or me what they're doing. You know, they're pretty secretive, but I will trust that they're good public servants who, in the spirit of Pat Fitzgerald, will try to get to the bottom of this.
And Andy, tell folks about the two brothers who have 6 public pensions.
Well, these are the Rita brothers of Blue Island on the far south side. Bobby Rita, who is a state rep, his brothers had several jobs. These are two brothers who, through a combination of public sector jobs for municipalities and the state and the county, stand to collect 3 pensions each when they retire. And this is another issue. In fact, one of the columns I wrote a month or two ago was about the fact that the pension bill passed in Springfield not only dealt with the financial shakiness of the system, but also the unethical nature of a lot of these pension scams. And one of the things that is being banned in the new bill, if it survives a court challenge, is double dipping. In other words, there's going to be let me take that back. One of the abuses that was proposed but didn't get into this bill that we're calling for to get in the next bill would ban double dipping. It would just say one of two things. You cannot collect a pension while you're on another public payroll. In other words, you spend 25 years with the state and retire and start collecting your pension and then go to work for the city of Chicago. You're making $100,000 from the state in your pension and $100,000 from the city of Chicago. That's wrong. You should get your pension eventually, but not while you're still in a public payroll. So there's a couple ways you can deal with this. You can say no pension while you're still collecting another government paycheck, or you can simply say 1 pension per individual. Either way deals with the problem. The Ritas haven't violated any law. This is just the scam-filled pension system that, of course, was going bankrupt, not just because of the scams, but they were a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. We're talking to Andy Shaw, the Better Government Association, about government ethics. Looking ahead to 2014, Andy, what would you guys like to see coming out of Springfield?
Well, the top thing on our wish list, and Crane's Chicago Business asked us to write an op-ed for the New Year's edition in which we look ahead and what is our New Year's wish for government. And I think our top wish is for the state to really start attacking the excessive units of government. I think these are figures that make people's eyes glaze over, but they're so important. We have 7,000 units of government in Illinois, 7,000 separate taxing bodies. Mm-hmm. That's almost 2,000 more than Texas and California, which are bigger states. It's 2,000 more than Pennsylvania, which is about the same size. It's time to attack the obesity epidemic in government and put the state on a real diet. So one thing we're going to do, we're going to investigate these units of government with an eye toward recommending ways to consolidate and eliminate slowly and carefully so you don't throw thousands of people out of work, but in a way that will downsize what's not necessary. Our best example that we've talked about, townships, for instance. 30 townships in Cook County do virtually nothing that isn't already being done by the county or the municipalities. Townships are a vestige of the horse and buggy era where you needed a unit of government close to you when you were on a farm or in a rural area. Now, with every square inch of Cook County filled in with more than 100 municipalities and Cook County government picking up the remaining areas, there's no need for townships. You know, townships each have an assessor who makes about $100,000. Doesn't assess any property. That's being done by the Cook County assessor, who has satellite offices in those same suburbs. So to have an assessor and an assistant and a secretary, that's absurd. They have highway departments. In some cases, the highway department of a township is responsible for 1 mile of road. Think about the cost effectiveness of a whole highway department to handle 1 mile, and on and on and on. They run food pantries, which many municipalities run also. The county has various ways to feed the hungry. So this is just one of the examples of a state that's out of control when it comes to units of government. Cook County alone has 500-plus units of government. That's the largest of any county in the country. We have 900 school districts. Of that, 150 of them have 1 school. And yet they're a separate district with administration. Time to consolidate 2 or 3 or 4 of these districts administratively. Don't lay off teachers. Don't close schools. Consolidate the administrative functions so you can get rid of a few district superintendents and assistant superintendents and secretaries. This is all common sense. It's been proposed one way or another for 20 years, and still nothing's happened. It's our top 2014 agenda item.
And would you save serious money by consolidating these 7,000 governments?
Oh, I think you could save billions of dollars. Right here at home, one of the areas we cover, you cover, and I used to cover, look at Cook County. 5 offices: clerk of the circuit court, assessor, treasurer, recorder of deeds. 5 offices essentially push paper. Now, why couldn't they push paper from one office? Now, you could argue the treasurer pays out, sends bills and collects money. The assessor assesses property. David Orr's clerk office does manage the elections, which is a labor-intensive process. But so much of this is just about the movement of paper. And it seems to me that in 2013, in a high-tech digital world filled with smart computers, if not smart people, then we ought to be able to figure out how to get that work done in 1 or 2 offices. Once again, you'd probably save $1 million in overhead.
And if you get enough publicity on this, maybe you can do a little bit of it.
Yeah, I wake up every morning with a full bag of ideas, many of which I know will take years, if ever, to reach fruition. I don't expect to be alive when we have good government in Illinois. I do expect to see incrementally better government a little bit at a time, and I think it is improving slowly. This is Bear Sunday, so let's create the football analogy. If I grab the ball for this better government campaign on the 2-yard line, I'm probably out to about the 10. I'm trying to get my first down and cross the 12.
Yeah.
And the finish line, 88 yards away, is really good government. So, you know what? I'm not going to take it to the Super Bowl, but if I can move it up the field a little bit further and then hand it off to someone else, Ditka got the 1 Super Bowl, maybe Trestman gets another one.
Sounds like you're not going to make it to the red zone.
Well, look, if I could get out to midfield, I would consider myself Hall of Fame candidate.
That's Andy Shaw, the Better Government Association. Andy, thanks for coming in.
And may I say to your listeners one last thing I'd be remiss if I didn't say. If you want to read about all of our programs and activities, go to bettergov.org, filled with information about our investigations, our policy, our advocacy, our watchdog training. And if you think that it's an important cause, think about becoming a member or a contributor, because we're a nonprofit and we're only as strong as the people who support us. We can't do it alone, not like the good old days when I was at ABC with a major broadcasting budget behind me. This is the little BGA, and if you want better government in Illinois, you gotta be on board. I can't do it alone.
Which has that added advantage of being true. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Bill. And again, Happy New Year to you and the family, and we'll do this again in 2014.
Same to you.